The next question is about issuing shares. Issuing is a fancy word for making. And this is a thing that happens if the company wants to make shares to sell to an investor. Let's say that we have the 120 shares in our company, and super duper company X wants to buy half the company. Hooray! We can just create 120 more shares and sell them to company X. That means that we go from 120 to 240 shares and say, hey company X, do you want to buy these shares at $100 a share or whatever you value it at? Company X will say, yeah! And then they pay the company $100 per share or 12K, and suddenly the company has 240 shares in it. This, of course, dilutes the value of the existing shares by half because there's twice as many shares. But of course, the shareholders get dividends from the income they just made by selling shares to company X. Here's where it gets a bit complicated. If you say yes to the question about first offering shares to members, you're basically saying that anytime you create shares, you have to offer them to existing members, shareholders, before you sell them to anyone else. So in the scenario where we have 120 shares and we make 120 more, we're legally required to get together at a board meeting and say, hey everyone, we're going to create 120 shares, and if you want, you can buy as many as you want. So shareholder Sally might say, oh, I can afford 20, yes please. And Bob's all like, yeah, me too, I'll take 30. That suddenly means that the 120 shares we've made, existing members have opted to buy 50 of them, which only leaves 70 we can actually offer to company X, which might be fine. The standard here is to say yes and offer shares to members first. This means that members have more control about who owns the company. The next one is about selling existing shares. This is different to issuing new shares because when you make new shares, you make all of the existing shares equally less valuable. With members selling their shares, it's all about one individual deciding what and when they want to sell. The default here is that anytime a member wants to sell shares, they just say, hey everyone, I have 45 shares and I'm selling them all to company X. Thanks a lot, have a nice day. You can opt into a more complex option here and say yes to this question, which is to say members have to first offer their shares to other members when they sell. Let's take the Sally and Bob example. If Sally decides she wants to sell half of her shares, she has to figure out how much she's going to sell those shares for and then offer them to members at that price, which makes very little sense. So let's go step by step. Sally first decides she wants to sell her shares. She decides how many. Let's say half of her 45, 22. She finds a buyer, company X, who says, $100 a share, excellent. Sally then legally has to offer those shares at that price to members of the company before selling them to company X. At which point, shareholder Bob might say, sweet, I'll take 10, and another shareholder says, I'll take 10 as well. Sally then has to choose whether she sells those shares to those members, 20, which would only leave 2 left for company X to buy if they want to. It's basically to ensure that no shareholder can sell out a controlling interest in the company to some shady external entity before first checking in with other shareholders. Now, honestly, most companies go the simple route here and say no, which means that anyone can sell their shares to whomever they want, but you can put yes here and be more controlling about who can sell shares and when. Just be aware that anytime you make stuff complex, you personally have to spend more time on both managing it yourself and managing lawyers who have to get paid. Last thing is some formalities about the first board meeting, which is basically the bit where everyone sits around a table and very officially says, here, let's start a company, okay, very good, all done. This stuff has to be written down properly to be legally binding, which is why an accountant or lawyer will often help you with the minutes for the first board meeting. First question is about whether you'll reimburse expenses. This is sort of funny. Basically, the company can't pay ASIC or lawyers or whatever money to do stuff because the company doesn't exist, but you need to pay money for the company to exist. So you have to agree that once the company is set up, it will pay people back for the stuff they paid to make the company exist. Legals. Compared to that, the next 2 questions are actually really easy. Which 2 directors sign for stuff to make it all official? And on what date does the company officially start, which has some tax ramification. And that's kind of it. This is actually the absolute minimum information necessary to properly set up a company in Australia. You can obviously make this as complicated as you want. It's your company, right? Like you could decide to add a clause to the company constitution that says all board meetings must be done on a yacht, and that new shareholders must juggle flaming knives before they're issued shares, or literally anything else you want. But it's generally better to keep things super simple. It means investors and new shareholders know what they're dealing with, and instead of spending all of your time talking to lawyers, you can get on with running the organization.